Okay, there we go, guys. Bit of a technical issue there. I'm probably going to have to try and edit this video of some kind. Yeah, that's annoying, and it's a shame because we are talking about Top Gun Maverick today, which is a absolutely incredible film that I've been out of my mind hyped for literal years right now. I'm going to lose these shades though. Oh my god, adjust. I'm not going to do them in the shades. I'm not going to be that guy. I'll leave that for the Rageaholic. But yeah, we've finally arrived at Top Gun Maverick 2022. I believe this film was originally meant to come out in 2019, wasn't it? You know, constantly pushed back due to COVID regulations and everything like that. And thankfully now, the movie's out, I've seen it, and I'm never going to have to watch the trailer in front of another film. Hopefully, fingers crossed, unless it gets some kind of rescreening, I guess, in the not too distant future. This is, of course, directed by Joseph Kosinski, starring Tom Cruise once again, Miles Teller, Jennifer Connelly. And I guess sort of like the best... Hopefully people jump in the comments. I don't know if that's kind of messed up the live stream at all. It looks like my timer's still been going, so I'm assuming that it's been continuing as normal. Maybe you guys have just seen a black screen. So hopefully we get some people in and we can talk about this movie a little bit. So before we actually get into the film, I'll do all the preamble. So please do subscribe to the channel for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, discussions, and live streams. We're getting into the summer movie season now, so a lot of these bigger films are going to be coming out. Obviously, Top Gun Maverick in a few weeks' time. Of course, we're going to be getting the new Jurassic Park film. Or Jurassic World film, sorry, completely different. So we'll see how that is. And of course, I'm doing the James Bond films as well, week to week, every single Tuesday. So if you're a Bond fan, if you're discovering this video, do subscribe to the channel for more Bond content. And of course, follow me on Twitter as well. There I'll post all the times that I go live. You can find me at Hobbit Fan Editor. That's at Hobbit Fan Editor. As I mentioned, I post all the times that I'm going live and some of the little bits, whether I'm at the cinema watching something or other little bits that take my fancy, really. And of course, let me know what you think of Top Gun Maverick as well. I think this is doing well. You know, from early reviews that I was watching as well, this was doing really, really well. And it was a packed audience today. I went to see it around, it was like 2:30 in the afternoon. Packed audience. And it was the iSense screen as well. So an even bigger screen, better sound system and all of that. So, yeah, I'm actually just going to check to see if I am actually streaming properly right now, in case that hasn't messed anything up. So you might hear an echo real quick, but we do it live, damn it. You know, this is what it's all about. And it might, you know, give a chance for more people to jump in if they discover the video through the algorithms and all that good stuff. Let me just see if I hear my dulcet tones. Do I? Loading. Okay, yeah, brilliant. Okay, so we should be live. Excellent. So, Top Gun Maverick. This is a film set 36 years after the first film. That is an incredible amount of time, and I swear to God, a lot of people have said this. Tom Cruise has not aged a single day. It's absolutely outrageous, you know, but that's what you get when you live in Hollywood and you have all that money and access to the best surgeons and dietitians and trainers and all of that good stuff. But, I mean, he has set the benchmark of what anyone should look like. Is he pushing 60 at the moment, I think, Tom Cruise? He's 59, yeah. In July, he's going to be turning 60. That's absolutely crazy. And it seems very much like he's going to be, you know, retiring all of his famous characters, you know, obviously Maverick. And then we've got the trailer as well for the first Mission Impossible 7. Well, part 1 of Mission Impossible 7. I guess you can call it Mission Impossible 7 and 8, really. Dead Reckoning, part 1, I think it's called, which looks incredible. I love me the Mission Impossible films, so it seems like Tom Cruise is on a bit of a roll at the moment. I love how invested he gets, you know, taking his personal life out of it or whatever he gets up to or whatever he chooses to believe in, that's up to him. But to me, Tom Cruise is kind of the last of a dying breed in Hollywood. He is what you would call unequivocally a movie star. Like when you see it, Tom Cruise, boom, put that, you know, front and center at the top of the poster, you know he's going to get an audience in. And I love how invested he gets in his projects, and you can tell that, you know, producing and everything like that, he really gives it his all. And he's always trying to push the envelope of everything that he's, well, probably that he's physically capable of doing at the moment. And, you know, seeing him in this film, he's in absolutely tremendous shape. So absolutely fair play to him. And of course, the plot to this, according to IMDb, after more than 30 years of service as one of the Navy's top aviators, Pete Mitchell, Maverick, is where he belongs, pushing the envelope as a courageous test pilot and dodging the advancements in rank that would ground him. I guess before I get into my thoughts on Top Gun Maverick itself, I need to take a little step back in time and give my opinions on the first Top Gun film, which I watched at the weekend, I believe. I think I watched it on the weekend to sort of prepare for this one. But it's a film that I've seen loads. I mean, it's ultimate machismo. It's one of my favorite films from the 80s. One of the best soundtracks to a film I've ever seen. Absolutely flawless soundtrack to that, you know, from Kenny Loggins. And of course, you've got Cheap Trick and Berlin. And, you know, even the orchestral stuff's amazing in that film. I've always said if I was stranded on a desert island and could only take 2 film soundtracks with me, it would be Rocky IV and it would be Top Gun. It's an ultimate feel-good film, isn't it? It's completely ridiculous. It's so totally homoerotic. It's, you know, machismo, everything you want from an 80s film, and it's incredible, and I love it. And not just that, but, you know, Tony Scott's direction and the footage they managed to get as well, the dogfighting is incredible stuff. And the fact that, you know, so much of it is shot in camera, well, it, you know, it had to be then, didn't it, being 1986. I love it. And I mean, I'm always kind of in this situation, really, when a new film's announced that it's going to be a sequel to a film that's been out for more than, you know, 20, 30 years, or even more than 30 years, whatever it happens to be. I'm always wary. And Top Gun, let's be honest, Top Gun is a film that never needed a sequel. Even with this out now, I would argue that, you know, Top Gun still didn't need a sequel. It is what it is. It's kind of in a vacuum. It's almost like a time capsule film. It's so 80s. It's fantastic. So when they said they were going to do, you know, Top Gun 2, it can always go one of 2 ways. Of course it can. It can either be bad or good. What am I saying? But we've seen so many of these, you know, remakes, soft reboots, whatever you want to call them, where it's basically the original film retold again. And it either misses the point of the characters completely, the older cast just gets sidelined to make way for a new cast, or the old cast is just portrayed in a complete shells of their former selves and what we wanted. Looking at Star Wars sequel trilogy right there. So this could go either way. And I was still, you know, the trailers were impressing me, all the behind the scenes featurettes and everything of Tom Cruise, how invested he was getting in there, how they were making a push to film so much of the stuff in camera and all of the aerial stunts and everything, and how, you know, Tom Cruise was, I guess, the grand majority of it he was actually doing himself as well as the cast. Went through like a rigorous training boot camp that was all put together by Tom Cruise himself. So I was cautiously optimistic, but I still had that nagging doubt in my head that Top Gun didn't need a sequel and they're going to tarnish what is, you know, a brilliant sort of standalone film from the 80s. Or it could be in the other camp, and, you know, another film that, or a TV series even, that comes to mind that is a continuation of something that came out over 30 years ago, but is a fantastic continuation and does its characters justice, is Cobra Kai. I absolutely adore Cobra Kai. All 4 seasons have been absolutely stellar, and yes, they bring in a new cast, and the new cast are great, but predominantly it doesn't sideline the older actors and the characters that, you know, the grand majority of the audience is probably there to see. And thankfully, I can say that this falls into the same camp as Cobra Kai. I absolutely love this film. I honestly haven't seen a blockbuster. This film, Top Gun Maverick, just defined the term, you know, cinema blockbuster. It's everything you want. The action is fantastic. It's shot incredibly. It's tense, the pacing, the editing. There were so many people in there, in that audience today. And all of them were just like on the, literally, I hate that term, but it's so true, on the edge of their seat, you know, biting their fingers. They were in it. They were invested. And the stakes of this film were so high. And it swept you up into the drama of the film. And honestly, this was an absolute thrill ride to me. I haven't left the cinema this exhilarated and this satisfied with a film in a long time. If you've been following my reviews, you probably know that I'm kind of jaded by cinema a little bit at the moment. It's just, you know, watching this, it's just, you know, that's what films should be all about. You know, it brought the same attitude of the original Top Gun. It did have some, you know, nostalgic moments. For example, you can see the trailer. There's another volleyball scene in there, and it does very much follow the same structure of the first Top Gun film. There are a lot of beats narratively that are almost identical to the first film, which can limit the film somewhat. I understand that, you know, they've got to try and give the audience what they want, and too much of that, as in the case of The Force Awakens for me, where it is pretty much just a straight up remake of A New Hope, with just more shiny colors and graphics and everything, an inferior remake to A New Hope. It doesn't quite fall into that category, but there are a lot of moments where, I mean, the first 10 minutes of this film are pretty much almost shot for shot the opening to the original Top Gun film. But I'm usually good with knowing if I'm going to be completely behind a film within the first 5 or 10 minutes. Obviously, a film can win me over if it's a little bit of a slow starter sometimes, but especially if it's a sequel so many years on, I usually know if its heart's in the right place and if it's going in the right direction from the first 5 or 10 minutes. That's the part of the film that's got to hook me. And, not to harp on the sequel trilogy too much because I know it has its fans, but when I went to see Force Awakens, when it started off, immediately I was like, this doesn't feel right. Something feels off with this. It doesn't feel like Star Wars to me. This one just completely, it was like coming home, really, the first 10 minutes or so of this, from the soundtrack, from the editing, from the titles coming up on the screen. It's got everything, and I'm going to keep spoilers to an absolute minimum. I'll warn you guys if I'm going to talk about spoilers or anything, because I don't want to give anything major away from this film until the point where I actually need to talk about it. Because this film does have a few problems in the writing. There is some very lazy and convenient writing with this film, which you come to expect sometimes with an action film, but this was ridiculously convenient, which are some of my lesser favorite moments of this film. Least favorite. I can't even talk, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm going to get a drink and talk amongst yourselves. If anyone's watching right now, you're probably not, but I mean, this film was announced, I think, in terms of production on this film, as far back as maybe 2010, 2012, and I remember when the initial talks came out about this film, that I think it was, it was still back when Tony Scott was alive, I believe, who was coming up with an idea for the sequel. And I remember trawling Wikipedia every other month to see if there'd been, if there were any updates on the film or anything like that. And I remember the initial premise of the film, for the longest time, was going to be the fact that the military was introducing unmanned drones. And I think it sounded, does anyone remember that movie from sort of like the early to mid 2000s? I think it was called Stealth. And it was about a fighter jet that was like an unmanned craft that went rogue, and then this like band of pilots had to go out and stop it. I've never seen the film, but I just remember the trailers for it and the initial premise for the film. And that pretty much sounded like what the original idea for Top Gun 2 was going to be. It was going to be this unmanned craft that went rogue, and Maverick and a team of pilots have got to go and stop it. It's like this super advanced AI self-aware jet. And I remember reading that thinking like, oh, this sounds pretty bad. I don't want that in my Top Gun film. And the screenplay was written by 3 people with this. You've got Aaron Kruger, who was the delightful writer of the Transformers sequels. You've got Eric Warren, singer, and Christopher McQuarrie as well, who, of course, has worked on the Mission Impossible films with Tom Cruise. So it seems like there are a lot of ideas in terms of the story and the structure of the film and where it wanted to go. And that is kind of evident in the film at some points. There are a bunch of moments in the film with the editing where the film straight up cuts to black and then picks up a little bit afterwards. And those moments in the editing felt a little bit awkward to me. And there were some bits which I'll talk about when I get to the spoilers that kind of took me out of the drama. It's almost like the writers wrote themselves into like an impossibly tense situation, didn't know how to resolve it, fade to black and pick up like, 10, 15 minutes later or something like that. And we never really see the proper fallout of that. We never see how that previous action scene concluded, and that did kind of it leaves a hole in the script, and that's where it comes down to the convenient writing for me. But this film, even earlier drafts as well, there were other ones where it was going to be based on the relationship between Maverick and Goose's son Rooster, which of course is the film. And the film is kind of an amalgamation of both of those ideas, the whole thing that pilots are being phased out to make way for unmanned drones. But that really only occupies the first 10, 15 minutes of the film or so. And then we completely drop that plot line, and then we just move on with the kind of a remake of the first Top Gun film with, the dynamic between Goose's son and Maverick. Maverick kind of still having PTSD from that moment from the first Top Gun film when Goose died. Spoiler alert for the first Top Gun film, I guess, if you haven't watched it. But, I think this could bring in new audiences, but you are going to get so much out of this film. This film is, unsurprisingly, made for those people that either grew up with the original Top Gun, love the original Top Gun, and are very familiar with it, because there's so many moments from it that, harken back to it, and it is a love letter to that first film. And its heart is definitely in the right place with it. I was just a little bit, coming out of the cinema, I was like on an absolute high with it, and I still absolutely am. I love this film. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's been a long time since I've left a film so exhilarated and elated, and just, that's what the big screen experience is all about. And, fair play to Tom Cruise for lobbying to get this on cinema screens and not settle into, put it on Paramount Plus or, the small screen. And he was adamant that he makes I think he even quoted, he says that he makes films to be seen on the big screen. And by all means, like, this is going to be absolutely #1 at the box office. This is going to make so much money, critical acclaim and everything like that. Everyone's loving this film. Well, that's a bit of a presumption. I'm sure there's people that actually don't like this film, but everyone in my screen seemed to enjoy it from, looking around and people getting into it. Go and see this on the biggest screen with the biggest sound system you can. If you can get to an IMAX, go and see it on IMAX. If you can settle for like an iSense or something like that, go to that, because it's absolutely a film that you must check out on the big screen, and I'd recommend anyone to do so. But it was kind of frustrating narratively how, and knowing the behind the scenes, and that whole unmanned craft thing was going to be the original plot line of the film, and they kind of took that idea and crammed it into a very short 10 to 15 minute opening scene. It was almost like a Bond action scene. It's like a scene that's unconnected from everything else. Granted, what goes down in the opening scene does get Top Gun back to Maverick, and this is where you get exactly the same beats from the original film. The bit where he pulls that stunt and then he's getting reprimanded by the officers and the admirals, and then they're like, but we're very impressed with your flying, so you're going back to Top Gun. It's that same moment, and there's so many familiar beats like that. But I think the strength of this film is in the character of Maverick, and that, yes, it does bring in a new cast. Of course, you've got the new love interest in the film, Jennifer Connelly, and you've got your whole cast, Miles Teller and all the other motley crew of would-be pilots of the, the new young upstarts, the new young cast. And they all kind of adopt the same personalities again and the same dynamics that you get in the first Top Gun film. You've got a character in the film called Hangman, who kind of occupies that Iceman role in this film, the very cocky, very brash, very full of himself and kind of bullying, argumentative one. And that interplay in this film is between Goose's son and Hangman. So there's lots of familiar bits like that from the first film. And I was really worried, from trailers and stuff, that Maverick might get sidelined or anything, but I can thankfully say that he doesn't. He is front and center in this film. His name's in the goddamn title, for God's sake. This film is about him and him having to let go of those past traumas and emotions that he had from 30 years ago. And I actually really liked that. And this is kind of an interesting comparison with The Last Jedi, because I think this, I know the sequel trilogy has its fans, for those poor unfortunate people, but no, I'm kidding. If you like it, you like it. But I think that the sequel trilogy, the Star Wars sequel trilogy, is an interesting comparison for this kind of thing of bringing back a franchise and bringing back characters from 30 years ago and doing it horrifically wrong and going about it in the wrong way, which thankfully isn't the case with this film. We see Maverick in this film, and he is, completely racked with guilt and emotion and regret, and he's kind of directionless, really. He hasn't wanted a promotion. He's wanted to stay put where he is. He hasn't wanted to become, a commander or admiral or anything like that. He is still very much a captain. He's stayed almost in a vacuum from where he's been since the previous film. And I think they even mention in the film that he tried teaching and instructing, and I think he only lasted 2 months, and then he dropped out of it because he wanted to get back to just flying planes. And I really like that. And you could go in a horrible direction with that and just make Maverick this washed up, miserable character the whole film. And that wouldn't have worked. Where the comparison between this and Luke Skywalker, for example, from The Last Jedi, is that to me, Luke was that all the way through the film. And I know that you could argue maybe he kind of came back at the end of Last Jedi, but he did it from the island and he didn't really get stuck in. And for so much of that film, he's a character, he's a completely different character. He's not Luke Skywalker. It doesn't feel congruous with what we've seen and how the character would handle situations and everything like that. But Maverick is still Maverick. He's going through a lot of this personal stuff. He's kind of directionless, but when he gets in that plane, he's still Maverick. He's still cocky, he's still charming, he's still a little bit full of himself. He is wiser in his older age, but when he still gets in that plane, he's still vastly superior to everyone else. He is a really good teacher, and he is trying to push the envelope with them and trying to get them to the next level pilots, essentially to his level. And he's really caring as well to his team and his crew and everything like that. And that was such a cool side to see of Maverick. I think overall this film, and it's got the benefit of releasing in 2022 and being a modern film by many stretch of the imagination compared to the 1986 film, this film goes a lot deeper, emotionally, and it is a much more emotional film than the first Top Gun film. It's not as, showy, it's not as machismo or anything like that, and it's a lot deeper, and it takes the characters to much further places than it did in the first film. So I think overall, as a film, it's probably a better made film, not to take anything away from Tony Scott, because I think that Top Gun is a flawlessly made film. I think it's fantastic, especially for the time that it came out. I think overall this, modern sensibilities, the editing, the pacing, the music, it's more intense, isn't it? Of course it is. So I think as a film, if you're going to judge the two, this is probably a better film than the first one. But which one would I rather throw on again and just watch and have fun with? The first Top Gun. I'm always going to have, a fondness for that first Top Gun film. So yeah, Tom Cruise is just kind of firing on all cylinders with this one. And this film goes places. There are characters that return from the first one as well. I'm not going to give too much away, but I was getting misty during this film. I was on the brink of tears, and I'm not ashamed to admit that on a live stream for so much of this film. This kind of felt like Tom Cruise's Rocky Balboa, or Creed even, which, I always say that Creed is one of my favorite examples of a soft reboot and a continuation that's done fantastically well. And I think that's probably a good comparison with this, in that Creed is very much beat for beat, kind of the same film as the first Rocky film, but it advances the character in a brilliant way and fleshes out the lore and the world and everything of Rocky. And this kind of feels like that to me. It's almost like Tom Cruise is retiring the character of Maverick and going to those more emotional places and take it in a direction that, wasn't the tone of the first film. This is like him doing his Rocky Balboa, which is brilliant, So let's talk about Miles Teller in it, because I think the emotional crux of this film really is that dynamic between, Maverick and Goose's son, Rooster. And it's brilliant to watch. That you can understand where Rooster's coming from, that he doesn't have that trust with Maverick, and that his father was flying with, Goose when he died in that first Top Gun film. So I think Miles Teller plays it very well. He looks exactly like him as well, with the mustache as well. Not many people can pull off a mustache. I definitely can't, but Miles Teller did. He looks very much in keeping with that. And there were some things. I think the big thing as well is, referring to previous characters before. You may or may not know, but there's quite a big character from the first film who does return in this one in a very emotional way, and that was probably one of the most emotionally impactful and hard-hitting scenes for me. That really got me in the fact that, Tom Cruise, I'm not going to spoil who it is, but you might know if you've read anything about it. The character features in the trailer, so you probably know that he's going to come back in some respect. But the fact that Tom Cruise lobbied so hard, to get them in the film, and when they do, it's wonderful, and it's a really pivotal scene in the film. But there are some characters that kind of don't get a look in, and I do think that's a shame. For example, Kelly McGillis, and this has been causing quite a stir online between comment threads and everything like that. I try and stay out of it, but I have been reading some saying, it's ageist that Tom Cruise can be in the film, but Kelly McGillis, who played the love interest in the first film, doesn't return in this. And I can honestly say she doesn't even get mentioned in this film. Meg Ryan also isn't in the film, who played Goose's wife, but she is mentioned, and they do kind of tie up her character and kind of tell you what happened to her after the events of the first Top Gun film, which I appreciated. And of course, there's flashbacks thrown in the film from footage from the first film, but there's not a mention of Kelly McGillis. And you could argue that's life. That's what old people say. She was an older woman and he was a student, and they were just kind of having some fun. And you could probably argue that wasn't going to last. She had a job opportunity. She was probably going to leave. They were going to have their fun. They shared that connection. And that is literally what happens in life. People can be ships in the night. But her character is kind of replaced in this with Jennifer Connelly. And actually, there's a really cool Easter egg in this film. And I don't know if it was intentional, but the soundtrack in this film is incredible. Not only is the score emotional, and it's got a whole bunch of people that worked on the score for this one, actually. You've got Lorne Balfe, who's kind of discount. He's like Hans Zimmer diet, as far as I'm concerned. I think he's a protege. He's a student of Hans Zimmer, and his music just sounds exactly like it. Hans Zimmer was actually involved in the score of this as well. You've got Harold Faltermeyer, who comes back as well. I don't know if they just repurposed his music from the first film, or if he actually came back to orchestrate some new stuff, but they probably had to credit him because the Top Gun anthem's in the film. Spoiler alert, and it's wonderful. And then, of course, you've got the hit single, which is probably going to win the Oscar for Best Original Song next year at the Oscars, "Hold My Hand" by Lady Gaga, and we'll get onto the music in a second. But where was I going with this? But the other songs, like the soundtrack in the film itself, you know, you've got "Slow Ride" by Foghat. You've got The Who in there. Oh my God, what else? I'm forgetting a major one that started playing. Oh yeah, the Easter egg. So Jennifer Connelly's character works behind a bar in this film. And when she's in the bar and she first appears, the song in the background that's playing in the bar is Let's Dance by David Bowie. And of course, Jennifer Connelly and David Bowie were in Labyrinth together. So that really pleased the 80s fan in me. And whether that was intentional, I don't know. But if it was, that was a really cool nod and I appreciated that. You know, Jennifer Connelly's fine in the film. I'm a sucker for a romance in a film, and her character basically does occupy the role that Kelly McGinnis's character did. She's, you know, there for that love aspect of the film. They even, one of the eye-rolling moments in the film, they try and recreate the love-making scene, the Take My Breath Away sex scene from the first film. Not quite the same lighting, but the same angle and everything, and it's, you know, ticking all those boxes from the first film. That was maybe one a little bit too far, and it was like, I get it, you know, you're trying to do all the same things. She's there to give emotional support to Tom Cruise when, you know, you have that lull in the film and he stops believing in himself, again, following that structure from the first film. There's that kind of lull in the film where Maverick gives up after the death of Goose in the first film, and then in this one, you know, something happens where he's turned away from, you know, being a pilot and from instructing, and then he's kind of down in the doldrums and he doesn't know what to do, and she's there to pep him up with a speech. So she's a very functional character. You know, the chemistry's fine. It wasn't great, but they kind of establish, and this is often a screenwriting technique where if you introduce someone new, you try and, they have history basically. It's mentioned they've kind of had this on-again, off-again relationship over all of the years, and Maverick just took off and broke her heart essentially, and they're kind of rekindling a past relationship. So it's fine, you know. Whether, I don't think this film necessarily needed a love story, but it's just kind of one of those aspects from the first film that was popular. A lot of people like a love story in their films, so we kind of get one with this one. It's not the focus though, and there's a lot of moments in the film that, you know, Jennifer Connelly just isn't in the film, and we don't focus on that side of things. Oh my God, what else can I talk about? I don't want to kind of give anything away at the moment. Let's talk the action then. Let's just talk like the actual cinematography, the dog fighting sequences and everything like that. This is some of the most impressive action I've ever seen, and the fact that so much of it was shot, you know, it was shot on, I forgot the camera they used, but it was, I think it was like 6K they filmed on, IMAX cameras. They had cameras loaded into the cockpit, you know, front, rear, and, you know, like, just, you name it. But it's filmed so well, and it makes so much of a difference. Now, there are some CGI effects in here, and they do kind of stick out just a little bit, but I know that you can't fire actual missiles at your cast flying planes, you know, flying jets. You can't do that. But they keep it to a minimum, and it's a tasteful mix of the two, and the actual piloting sequences are just absolutely outstanding. I really like the piloting sequences in the first film, but of course with, you know, modern technology and what they're capable of now and how much more dynamic they can make it, it really shows. And everyone was loving it and getting swept up into that drama. They set the stakes very well, and they make it very clear the mission that they need to do. It's a very simple sort of like, get in, blow up this, I think it's like uranium or something. It's like this radioactive material. They've got to fly in under radar, blow up this stockpile of uranium and get out of there. Sort of like these impossible, they kind of make it seem like this is absolutely impossible. This is a suicide mission that they're all on. And that kind of works into Maverick as well, because he has always had that streak. I mean, his name is Maverick, for God's sake. Like, it's literally spelling it out. But he does seem like he's on very much a self-destructive streak in this one. In the first film, he's this, you know, cocky, brash, arrogant guy who wants to prove himself, who wants to be the best, who's this young upstart and full of himself, which, you know, is kind of occupied. It's kind of an amalgamation in this of Hangman's character is kind of an amalgamation, mostly of Iceman, but also of Maverick from the first film. Whereas in this one, you get the impression that he's a guy who's got nothing left to live for. He's going to fly by the seat of his pants, and if he dies in the process, he doesn't care. and it's quite this deep psychological aspect to the character, which I really appreciate. So, you know, they're taking on the suicide mission, but he is adamant that he wants all of his pilots to return safe and return home, which is a beautiful carryover from that first film. So that's kind of where the strength of this film lies for me, is the continuation of Maverick's character and just the interplay and the relationships of all the other characters. The pacing, the drama, the tension is just directed fantastically well. And the whole audience today was just completely invested. And it's so rare that you find that in a film. Mostly audiences are just like passively watching, but this felt like an event. This felt like a film that everyone showed up for, that really wanted this and got swept up into the drama and reaction of it. And I was there with it. Now, there are some moments towards the end of the film with quite lazy writing. I guess I'm going to go into spoiler territory right now. So if you haven't seen Top Gun Maverick, please, for the love of God, go and watch it, because it's fantastic. It has to be seen on a big screen with the best sound system you can. It's a worthy successor to the first Top Gun film. It did it proud. It's emotional. And I miss films like this, you know, that have that attitude, that aren't filled with all of these agendas and politics and everything. And it's just a solid escapism, entertaining film. That's what we need more of. I need more films like this in my life. And it's just, yeah, it's brilliant. However, there are some moments of lazy writing. The first moment I mentioned that it kind of keeps cutting to black. And to me, especially the action scene at the end, to be honest, you know, you're firing on all cylinders. You are just out of your mind like crazy, like the tensions ramping up, and the odds are becoming more and more impossible. And it's, you know, like this building block effect of everything that, you know, they've got to go up against. And you're invested in the people, and you really like this team, and, you know, you want to see them all make it back safely. And it reaches the climax of that, and it cuts to black. And we pick up like however much time afterwards. And the flow of the whole climax of the film just kind of ground to a halt for me. It's going, the locomotive's moving, you know, we're moving. And then we stop, cut to black, fade in. And then we have to kind of reaffirm a new sense of equilibrium. And we have to start again. And the momentum just grinds to a halt. And we have to build that back up again. And then I think it does it again. It felt like throughout the film they kept periodically doing that. And if you've seen the film, you might know what I mean, but there's a moment in the climax where it feels like all hope is lost. But then we cut to black, and then we pick up, and it's kind of rectified straight away. And I felt like it felt like a way to keep the focus on Maverick at that point towards the end, after the cut to black. And I feel like that was a mistake. I think that was a time that narratively you should have had that moment where Rooster came in and Hangman came in to prove himself, and we focus just at that part on that new cast in order to save Maverick at the end. But we don't. We kind of cut to Maverick on the ground, we watch him, and then we kind of see Rooster eject and parachute from a distance, and then it's like a buddy action scene at that moment with Maverick and Goose trying to escape. And this is where the really convenient lazy writing came in. Before they start their mission, the Navy kind of sends a whole volley, a whole storm of missiles to completely airstrike the enemy's landing, their runway. All of their planes, all of their equipment, everything, they just completely nuke it, missile it, so that then allows their fighters to go in with limited enemy fighters to take them out, because they've just kind of leveled everything. So they establish that equilibrium very much, that these missiles just wipe out everything on this runway. At least we're led to believe that. The fighters then go in, they complete the mission. Maverick, they're kind of overwhelmed. Maverick is shot down, and Goose decides to go back and save Maverick. And that's the part where we needed to focus on Rooster. We needed to focus on Goose's son right there, where, you know, he turns back and he flies back, and we're following him, and he's completely swamped by fighters, and he's really struggling. And you've got Hangman, who's still back at the base, who's waiting to engage. He wants to get stuck in the fight and help his wingman, Rooster. And then, boom, you have, you know, I'm rewriting the film right now, and I hate doing that, but that felt like the natural progression of where the film was going. Hangman then comes in, is flying with Goose, and they both lead a rescue mission to get Maverick back. And then you get back to the base, and that's the end of your film. There was a sufficient action climax at the end at that point. But the pacing did really slow down at the end, and I think that was down to the editing, and that was down to the structure. When we cut to black, we cut to Maverick, who's on the ground, as I mentioned, and Goose is also shot down, and the two of them get together. And then they're like, right, well, how do we get home? All of the other fighters have been instructed to head back to base, and they're kind of on the ground, and it's like, right, we need to find transport. So they walk to the enemy's base, where conveniently there's one plane that has remained unscathed from the missile, from the airstrike. And even more conveniently, that plane happens to be exactly the same make and model of the fighter plane from the original Top Gun film from 1986. Why the enemy have that, and why that happens to be the only one? Well, it's nostalgia, isn't it? And that's where the convenient poor writing came in my opinion. And it reminded me, going back to the Star Wars the Star Wars sequels, how everything's just convenient and kind of laid out there because we've got to get the characters to this point. Writing and, everything, and sense and logic be damned. And it just happens to be that point. It reminds me of The Force Awakens, where they just so happen to find the Millennium Falcon on Jakku, and it's right there, and they can just take it. And then conveniently afterwards, Han Solo happens to just be in the area, and he gets the Falcon back because we need to get Han Solo into the Falcon. And it really struck me like that. I didn't need that to be the original plane from Top Gun. People might get a kick out of it that it's nostalgia. But that writing there, I'm like, what are the odds right there? And the two of them just make it across the runway. When they're walking across the runway, there's a bunch of guards walking around, enemy soldiers, and they just walk right past them, and it's fine. And they load this plane and they get ready to take off. And then we get a whole other action scene where they're trying to blend in with these two enemy fighters in the air. And then the enemy realizes that they're not who they say they are. And then they start engaging. We get another action scene. And then we get another action scene after that where there's another fighter pilot that it's like there's always a bigger fish, because I haven't made enough Star Wars comparisons in this review. There's another plane in front of them that comes at them, and it's in an impossible situation. It looks like they're both going to die. And then right at that last second, Hangman comes in and saves the day, just at that split second as the missile is about to be fired that will kill, Rooster and Maverick. And that's where it kind of lost me. It was the final part of the action scene. Now, don't get me wrong. It is exhilarating still. It's fantastically shot. It is tense. But that's where the cracks in the writing really started to show for me at the end. And it's a shame because I think you could have just kept it to the actual mission. The ending action scene of Top Gun 1 isn't like this big bombastic thing. It's very economic. It gets in, it gets out. And you could maybe say that was the limitations of the time. But it was very tightly written, and it's functional as an action set piece. This one almost felt like it had three separate action climaxes, all kind of stacked one after the other at the end. And it kind of slowed the pacing down at the end, and that writing did just kind of fall apart. And there's another similar situation towards the beginning of the film as well, where we cut to... So it establishes that in order to keep this program going, Maverick's got to be piloting this newfangled jet that they've made, and he's got to reach Mark 10. And he's flying, and he's going supersonic, and he's trying to push the envelope. He's going to Mach 10.1, 10.2, 10.3. The ship's completely ripping apart. The engines fail. He's almost like in the stratosphere at this point. Like, the guy's almost in space. And, he gets knocked unconscious, and the engines fly out, and he's traveling at ridiculous speed, like the fastest anyone's ever gone. And then we cut to black, and then he's just on the ground. There's a comedic moment where he walks into a bar, grabs like a glass of water, and a kid thinks he's like a space alien that's touched down and landed on Earth. And it's played for laughs, but I was there like, wow, that's really convenient. It's almost like you put Maverick in this impossible situation that, how did he recover out of that spin? Especially because how fast he was traveling, and the plane was almost tearing itself apart. But then we cut to black because we don't need to answer that question, and then we just pick up, when he's landed and he's fine, and we play it off as a laughy, jokey moment. So there's some writing and editing choices like that I didn't appreciate in the film. So they'd probably be my only negatives with the film, really. Hey, we've got Carl. Hey, how you doing, man? I am coming up to the end of the review, probably. I might keep it going a little bit longer. My question to you is, my friend, have you seen the film yet? Have you seen Top Gun Maverick, or are you planning on seeing it later this week or at the weekend? I think, fortunately, I've finished all of the spoiler section now, so I think you've dodged a bullet there. So let's talk about the Lady Gaga song. So when I heard it on its own, I wasn't too keen on the song. Beautiful melody, but it sounded too, dare I say, too modern. And if you compare it to Berlin's Take My Breath Away, Take My Breath Away is just an absolutely flawless song from its production, the orchestration, everything like that. And it's such a beautiful song. It's one of the best power ballads ever written from a film. And it won the Oscar. And Lady Gaga's probably will too. But this one had like a kind of, I don't even know if you call it dubstep, because, I'm an aging gentleman now who's not, down with the modern crowd or anything, but it sounded too modern, and I would have liked something a little bit more synthy, a little bit more in keeping with the original Top Gun. And this film does have its, fair share of synth and everything like that. I guess this is kind of a mini spoiler for the music. Danger Zone plays at the beginning. You've got the Top Gun anthem in there. So there are those moments where, that plays right at the beginning. It feels like you're watching the first film again. They even timed the opening titles in exactly the same way that the first film did. And that made me feel right at home. It was like, okay, brilliant. We've got Kenny Loggins in there. Because that was the one thing I was holding out for. I was like, Kenny Loggins was the heart and soul of the 80s. And I'll be damned if he isn't in this film in some respect. But they do open with Danger Zone, which was great to hear again. And, and the Top Gun anthem too. But the song now, the Lady Gaga one, has really grown on me. And there's different variations throughout the film where that kind of techno beat seems like it's dialed down a little bit more. Pardon me. You get more of the orchestral vibes coming through in it. The theme recurs throughout the rest of the film, be it on piano or full orchestra, and it's a really moving piece. I was trying to work out the chords on it actually on my keyboard as soon as I got back, and it does follow a very cliched and kind of boring chord progression, but nevertheless it's a wonderful song. It's an emotional song, and when you hear it in the film coupled with the images, this does feel like like a swan song for Top Gun. Like it's done. Please no more. I don't want a Top Gun 3. This ends it perfectly as far as I'm concerned. So Carl says, I was going to go tonight, but it was sold out. Amazing to see a non-Marvel film selling a screening out. I'll watch it over the weekend. Yeah, I mean, my screening early in the afternoon was full. I think a lot of the people in there seemed like they were quite old-timers that were probably there for the first film, but it was so great, and I love that. When people aren't being annoying, if a screening's packed and people are talking or rustling, sweet wrappers and everything like that, and crisp packets, that really annoys me. But when an audience shows up and is invested in the film, same thing happened when I went to Tenet, when that came out. And I think just for the fact as well that this film has been meaning to come out for years now, for almost 3 years, and we're finally here. This feels like it's that last one of those films that didn't come out. There was No Time to Die. What else was there? There was Black Widow. And I want to say this one, I think they were probably the big three, maybe. I know there were some other ones as well, but yeah, I really hope you get to it over the weekend. Try and get your tickets booked, because I think that this weekend's probably going to be packed as well. So, I mean, this got a midnight screening last night, and for a Top Gun, Top Gun got a midnight screening. I didn't think Top Gun like that would pull a crowd as much as it did, but everyone showed up for this film, and I love that fact. And it's great that the film is going over so well that people are really gravitating towards it. As I say, there's a lot of moving elements in this film as well. I know you haven't seen it yet, so I was actually going to spoil it now, but there's, as I've alluded to before in the review, there's a returning character from the first film that just hit me so goddamn hard. And then the end of the end of the mid-credits, they do a dedication to Tony Scott, which I thought was a wonderful tribute. And I do think this film is worthy of Tony Scott. So yeah, I mean, it feels very safe. It feels very paint by the numbers of the first Top Gun film. It pretty much follows all of the same beats narratively from the first film, which can limit its creativity. But this isn't like, I'm going to go to the Star Wars sequels again. I've compared them to that so much. It's not the Star Wars sequels where it's like we've got to rehash everything and we can't take chances and we can't. Or you could argue that Last Jedi did take some chances, but awful chances. At least they took chances in the second film, but they were bad. So I don't know where that, how would I review The Last Jedi? I think I have before, actually. But the way that they advance the characters in this, specifically Maverick and his dynamic with, the people around him, the people in his life, and just kind of where we find him at this point in his life, that he is directionless and that he is kind of on this almost suicide streak. He is on this very self-destructive streak. But nevertheless, he is still the Maverick we remember. He has still got all of the skills, even more so. He is wiser to the world. It's a brilliant continuation of that character. Did Top Gun need a sequel? Absolutely not. Was this a good sequel? Yes. It's a very safe sequel, as I've mentioned, but the action scenes are incredible. A little bit of lazy writing here and there, especially towards the final part of the action climax, which I wasn't keen on. And that has kind of, the more I think about that, the more that I am kind of really rubbed up the wrong way about that, because it felt like it spoiled such a promising build up to that action. But even so, the action itself is filmed fantastically well. The soundtrack's brilliant, and it's made me feel something. I haven't felt something at a film in so goddamn long. You have no idea. I mean, not counting the Bond films that I'm seeing each week, but specifically new films. So many films that come out just feel like they're, a product, they're a cash cow, they're this and they're that. And you could maybe make the argument for this that, this is going back to an older IP from the 80s, which things from the 80s haven't we touched yet? Back to the Future? No, not yet. Gremlins? No, we'll come to that. Oh, Top Gun, there we go. Let's, make a film about that. But I know that a sequel has been talked about since probably around like 2010, 2012, and it's great that it's finally here and that it is as good as it is. And I'd absolutely recommend, as I've mentioned multiple times, seeing this on the biggest screen possible with the best sound system possible. This is a film that is meant to be seen at the cinema, 100%. And I do think it is sadly going to be, unless you've got like a home cinema system, it is going to be one of those films that isn't as impressive watching it at home that it would be on the big screen. So, if you can get a ticket to it, because if it's selling out, I mean, it's great that it's selling out and it's going to make a lot of money, and it's actually a really good film that doesn't load itself with agendas and politics, as I've mentioned. And it's so rare in a film now to just make a film that's for escapism and fun and isn't trying to tear down the original or make fun of the original or tear down its icons or anything, or make you feel miserable or cerebral or anything like that. It's just a fucking entertaining, adrenaline-filled rush of a film. And for a Top Gun sequel, that's what you absolutely want. That's what I wanted, and it succeeded. Driving to the cinema, driving back, listening to the Top Gun soundtrack at an obnoxious volume, wearing my shades when I walked into the cinema, because yes, I am that guy and I am that sad. Yeah. Just a really good time. And actually, this is very rare for me to say as well. I will probably go and see this film again. I would love to see this film again at the cinema. So there you go. That's my glowing reception. A very safe but a very fun film. And, it's Top Gun, for God's sake. It's not like... it's not Hamlet, for fuck's sake, is it? It's not this, like, really... as an IP, as a property, Top Gun isn't like this really, Shakespearean type thing. It's just fun. But I think that as a sequel, they did advance it really well with the characters. I'm repeating myself now anyway. I'm just kind of going around the houses with this. But Carl says it's almost like if Hollywood just makes an old-fashioned action film, people will come and support it. Definitely. And that's actually it. I try not to go into any film now with a ridiculous level of hype, because I've been there. I've been that guy that's been out of my mind hyped for a film, and there's not quite a feeling like just being crushingly disappointed by a film. So I always try and go in now with the attitude like, right, if it's good, it's good. If it's terrible, I'm going to tear it a new one. And I always try and keep an open mind with a film if I can. Sometimes if just everything you're seeing coming out about something is terrible, like the Amazon Lord of the Rings of Power series, where everything is just wrong and a slap in the face to the source material, it's difficult to go into something like that with an open mind, because you have to comment, you have to judge all the marketing that you see for it, So there was always that underlying doubt with me with this film. But when the early reviews came out for the film, and reviewers that I trust were saying that this is like an ode to those classic 80s machismo action films where it just does what it needs to do, no holds barred, and it's fun and it's escapist. When people were reviewing it and saying that about it, that's when my curiosity did peak. And thankfully, all of those reviews that I watched were absolutely true. There's the female characters in this, for example. You've got a female pilot, and if this was being made by Disney, they'd make a massive fucking deal about that, and every single sentence would be that, oh, she's the best pilot, and the male pilots are terrible, and we should watch what she's doing, and she's amazing at everything because, she's a woman and she's great. But you have her character in this, and she's one of the best, just not in terms of like ability, she's level with everyone, but she's one of the best characters in the film, just because she's capable. She gets in and she does it, and they don't make a big song and dance about it. And that's all I want from a film. You haven't got to keep beating us over the head with it. Like, look at this, you know, appreciate this, appreciate, you know, girl power, all of that. That can still be in a film, and there's not a problem with having that in a film. But it's when it's just, it's part of the film. It's just so naturally part of the character and the film and the dynamic. And why is it so difficult for screenwriters and for studios to think about that? I mean, we all know that studios are reactionary anyway. It's all a facade. They're all so phony. They just do it to box tick and, you know, all of that stuff. So it is really refreshing, actually, to watch this film. And none of those moments come to the forefront at all. You know, there's stuff in the film where they joke about, like, you know, good luck, gentlemen. And then he turns around and, like, winks at the woman who's part of the team. But that's just banter. You know, that's character banter. It's not, you know, beating you over the head with, look at how progressive we are. It just makes the difference, you know? It's fun. It's fun. Anyway, I'm repeating myself at this moment. Go and watch Top Gun Maverick. Before you do, watch the original Top Gun again. It's fucking fantastic, and it's so much fun. As I mentioned, this is probably a better film than the first Top Gun film, but if I'm going to, you know, in terms of its characters and everything like that and the level of depth that it goes to, but out of the two, which one would I rather watch again? It's going to be the first Top Gun film, and that could be nostalgia. That's just because it's fun, and it's completely a product of its time, a product of the you know, a product of a time that I absolutely adore and live and breathe. So, yeah, I loved it. I was getting very misty. There were a lot of times where I could feel a tear coming on. I was welling up. I was almost there. If I wasn't surrounded by people and I was watching it on my own, maybe I would have got to that point. But yeah, go and see it. Right, that'll do it for me. I mean, I can do the clickables now. So if you haven't done so already, Carl, I know you are. Thank you, man. But if you're watching this now and you've made it to the end of this review, please do subscribe to the channel for more movie reviews, trailer reactions, discussions, and live streams. I realize that I haven't done many trailer reactions, guys. I'm trying to find the free time. Okay, it's very difficult, but I will get to it because, you know, there have been some big ones that come out. Of course, you can find me live every Tuesday for the new James Bonds, and that's when you can probably next find. Actually, no, you can find me before that. Let's take that off the screen a second. We've got Kenobi this week, which I'm sure we're going to have plenty to talk about that. I'm still trying to figure out when I can get a review out for that. I know it comes out on Friday. I am actually away Friday evening and most of Saturday. So I'm going to try and get it out Friday. I might have to do a pre-recorded review for the first 2 episodes just this week. And I might schedule a post to that. But hey, the best way that you know exactly what I'm doing when it comes to the Kenobi reviews, go and follow me on Twitter, at Hobbit Fan Editor. That's at Hobbit Fan Editor. Post all the times that I go live. I'll keep you guys updated of what you can expect from the channel and other little bits in between as well. Let's have some fun. You know, hit me up, give me a follow. Right now, I can click it. But I am definitely 100% going to be back next week with a new James Bond review. That's going to be Diamonds Are Forever, 1971 film. I'm going to be going live at 11 p.m. British Standard Time. As soon as I get out of the cinema, I will be back and I'll be talking that film. So, yeah, go and check out all of my other James Bond reviews in the meantime. You've got 6 to watch now. I did On Her Majesty's Secret Service last night, which was a really fun stream to do. And, yeah, if you haven't done so already, like, Carl, when you eventually get to it, let me know what you think of Top Gun Maverick, because I'm interested to hear what you think about it, man. Thanks a bunch, man. You know, he's talking about Kenobi there. Whenever the review is ready, I'll be there. I think we're going to have a lot to talk about, and I hope it's a lot of positive things to talk about. But fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. And I feel like I've been fooled about 10 times right now. It's like Plinkett says. It's like we're a battered housewife. Anyway, I'm rambling. But yeah, take care, everyone. Go and see the film. Enjoy cinema. Enjoy films again. Enjoy it while it lasts, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, everyone.